David Schulte. I will give our numbers in 5 minutes. You might want to have a pen handy. Occasions. Let's go to John in Staten Island. John, I welcome you.
Hi, Barry.
How you doing?
Hi, David.
Hello there.
Neighbor Schulte, as the great Frank says.
Yes.
Barry, as a relatively new talk show host on another station, says when he signs on, it is I.
He's got to be a conservative then.
G. Gordon Liddy, yes.
Uh-huh.
Now, Barry, let's not be fooled by the unusual support that these, quote, black ministers are showing for the more conservative Republican governor-elect Christy Whitman in this alleged voting bribery scandal. You know, the only reason that they're siding with Christy is because their image, their necks are at stake. If it was anyone else that was being accused of this, these same black ministers would be screaming that this was a Republican dirty trick that defeated our politically spiritual liberal white brother Jim Florio. They're only in this, they're only backing up Christy Whitman because their image is at stake. They're not doing this because they're good-hearted people. These ministers, I'll bet you on any other occasion, Barry, they're as left-wing and racist as Herbert Daughtry or Kelvin Butts or Jesse, I never met an enemy of America I didn't hug, Jackson. So let's not fall for this so-called good-spirited reaction they're having.
John, I'm not in a fighting mood tonight, and maybe that's why I hear something now that I'd like to call to your attention. Because I like to believe that in your heart you want to be a good person. You are certainly an effective debater. And when people say, Barry, why are you so soft on John? He's a racist. I remind them that back in the days of communism, you were one of the best callers I ever had, and for all those years, I never had a quarrel with you because we never talked about race. And I'm very worried about your racial attitude. And let me tell you what you have just reminded me of. The late Roy Cohn explained something to me that I didn't think I could understand. I never went to law school. But the late Roy Cohn proved that the government was after him. Why? Because they gave immunity to people in the center of the alleged crime to get Roy Cohn. By the way, there's a southern verb I would like to teach northerners. It's not get, it's git, G-I-T. A very common verb south of Richmond. Now, it's hard to define. Get does not mean get in the sense of obtain or procure. Get is a very transitive
has more
action.
Emphasis.
Yeah, and it's hard to explain. But when they get you, then you know that you've been got. Okay, they were out to get Roy Cohn. How did Roy prove that? So that somebody like I could understand, like me could understand easily. Roy explained that the government gave immunity to people who, by the government's own indictment, were at the center of the crime in order to get Roy Cohn, who, even by the government's yardstick, was on the outskirts of the crime. That is not the way immunity is used. Immunity is used to give people on the outskirts of the crime immunity to get people at the core of the crime. You understand? Now, turn the page. For all the things that you might see in this story, you have simply turned up your electronic microscope until you can find the one thing in the story you can use to criticize blacks for. Why don't you pick up the part of the story that I picked up, that the white Democrats, insofar as they make something of this, are insulting blacks? Because the more that the Democrats put their hands on their hips and scream, you kept the blacks from voting, then the more they are proclaiming we Democrats think blacks are sheep and are incapable of voting unless and until their clergyman exhorts them to vote. Hold it. I want to know how you plead. My charge is you have taken the much less interesting aspect because that gets blacks, and you've ignored the aspect that I gave you because it doesn't get blacks. It gets Democrats, mostly white. Stay there. You're listening to John of Staten Island stands accused by me of having revealed his anti-black bias because of all the little pieces of jewelry in this Rollins case that he could have stooped down to pick up. He picked up the smallest, least lustrous jewel of all, but it is the only jewel that he can use to scratch black eyes out. And John, I really wish I could change your heart. I'm about to give up.
No, Barry, I cite my example because most people know what how the Democrats are going to react. They know them, but they don't know what we're really up against in this country. So-called black ministers hide behind their robes or their collars. They're just as radical as any white liberal left-winger. And plus, not too many people have the nerve to cite these things about blacks because they'll be called racist. You have to point these things out. We are in a one-sided race war in this country. So I'm going to cite these things. I'm in a street brawl with these people. There is no talking to these people. There is no compromise. Rudy Giuliani is making a tremendous mistake pandering to these people. He should go to them. Don't even look to me to get any kind of special treatment. You step out of line and I'm going to step on you like I would on any criminal. That's what he should tell them. Never mind this pandering. And these black ministers get away with a lot of stuff.
I just have one thing to say. I wish you would use more adjectives in your accusations. In other words, some may do or may be guilty of what you accuse them of, but you are saying, in effect, all are.
I'll compromise with you. I'll say most.
Well, even then, you couldn't prove that.
Oh, I could very well prove it. We just had a poll here in New York City about. We just had a poll here in New York City about, what was it, 4 or 5 months ago, where 65 or 67% of blacks said that they're anti-Semitic.
All right. John, somebody once tried to figure out what the smallest measurable unit of time is. It's not a smallest measurements. In NASA, they use what they call nanoseconds. I think a nanosecond. Nano, what is it, 1/10,000th of a second or something like that?
1 millionth or something.
Okay,
yeah.
My cousin Gurney says there's a time interval even shorter than that, and that is the interval between the time the light turns green in Manhattan and the car behind you honks. But I think I've come upon an even shorter interval of time. That is Johnny's getting elected and John of Staten Island turning on him for pandering to blacks.
Well, you know why, Barry?
No, on the level, no joke. How long did it take after the victory? How many hours and minutes did it take before you turned on Giuliani, who you supported, because you didn't like the way he was approaching the blacks of New York City?
Well, I had expected this even, before the election was won. We talk politics among friends, and I did not like Rudy Giuliani that much. I like George Marlin better. He's more conservative. But anything to get rid of David Dinkins. But I knew this would happen. I knew he'd run up there to these racists and try and pretend that he was their friend, and they would pretend that they were really out to support him. When the moment he disagrees with them, they'll call him a racist. Look at Charles Hine, how he pandered and hung those kids in the Howard Beach, the prosecutor, and then the moment he didn't agree with them, they cursed him out. The same thing with Mario Cuomo.
All I can say is that if Mr. Giuliani followed your advice and stepped on the blacks, I think you'd see a lot of things happening that you wouldn't want to see happen.
You mean blackmail would work? Is that what you're saying, Dave? That's the way we have to live? This is exactly why I say, and not treat them like anyone else, because they know that they can get away with this crap.
Well, you and I disagree.
We should have mowed every one of them down in the streets of Los Angeles.
Okay, the House would prefer the word nonsense, twaddle, balderdash, absurdity. Okay, John, thank you very much for your call. Take care. Let's go to Richard in Long Island.